Thank you to everyone who is attending today. It means a lot that you showed up for our Delaware Takeover night as a part of Venture Cafe Philadelphia's Thursday gathering. I'm super excited to be moderating this panel discussion. And I should say I'm the program manager and experience designer for Venture Cafe Philadelphia. So it's really important for me and my team to make sure that we highlight not only the great things that are going on in Philadelphia, but greater Philadelphia, and especially considering Emily and I graduated from UD, definitely have a lot of pride there. So that being said, I'm going to ask if our panelists can provide a brief self-introduction for each of them, and then we'll jump into some questions. Pedro, could we start with you?
Yes, my name is Pedro Moore. I am a graduate of University of Delaware as well. Serial entrepreneur. I venture capitalist. I do help vet deals for Damon John on Shark Tank, and I have a new startup called Fund and Fuel, which allows fractional investing and franchises.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Pedro. Bobby, can we go to you next?
Sure. I'm Bobby Ritterbeck. I am the Chief Marketing Officer and lead the general manager for our personal loan product at Marlette Funding. Our brand to the public is known as Best Egg. We're a FinTech startup, started in 2013, so I don't know if we're quite a startup anymore, but we've been growing in the Delaware community for the last 7 years. We have about 250 employees, and it's been a really good run so far. I don't know if I can call myself a serial entrepreneur. I've been in a couple of startups, and this latest one is stuck for a little bit.
Sweet. Well, we are honored to have you here with us, Bobby, so thank you. All right, Mr. John Collins, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Garry. And thanks for having us and for all the work you do, and thrilled to be able to learn from and speak with Pedro and Bobby today. Also Blue Hen, so we've got like a whole coop, I guess, of Blue Hens here today. I graduated from University of Delaware, from Townsend, Delaware originally, and currently I'm a partner at FS Vector. We're an advisory firm based out of Washington, and we advise financial technology companies and banks on a host of regulatory and compliance and political matters. And I'm also co-founder of the First State FinTech Lab, and we're an economic development focused nonprofit that's dedicated to making sure Delaware is leading the country in the FinTech industry.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Definitely doing important work to build up the FinTech ecosystem in Delaware as well. So to sort of build off of that, my first question revolves around, these challenging times. We're all going through it in different ways. But we know that financial health and financial well-being is incredibly important. And that's one of the things that's going to help people get out of this successfully. So that being said, what do you think is, or what are the greatest opportunities that this current landscape provides to the FinTech industry? And John, if we could start with you and then go around and have everyone touch on it, I think that might be the best way to go about it.
So, I guess, obviously one of the things is you've just seen a massive user pickup in FinTech applications, I think across, and these two will know certainly more than I, but, kind of across demographics, just because people don't want to touch cash or can't get out of their homes, is a very simple reason for that, I think. But I think looking forward from here, at least from what I've seen and from talking to folks both in and out of government and in and out of industry, is there's been a real recognition that our payment system in the US really just doesn't work as well as it should, if work really at all, in terms of how people actually interact with money. And I think hopefully by the end of this, you're going to see not only a modernization of payments, but a whole rethinking of how payments networks interoperate. And 5 or 10 years, and hopefully we never have a reason to do this again. We won't be sending out stimulus checks. You'll be able to get some things out to your Square Cash account or your PayPal account or whatever kind of digital wallet you might have.
Awesome. Thanks for that, John. Yeah, we definitely saw how certain fintech companies were sort of well positioned to jump in and support with those checks and distribution of funds, and others sort of having to figure out how to innovate and sort of figure out where they fit in to this current landscape. And to that point, Bobby, I know you at Marlette and with Best Egg provide personal loans. So what's your sort of take and sort of outlook on the current environment?
Yeah, so it's been pretty interesting actually. So when this kind of first went down and we realized in kind of late March, early April, the situation that we were all collectively in, we ended up taking a really proactive approach with customers to try to help them stay afloat during all this, and reached out to them, told them that, hey, there's options. So obviously we have a few 100,000 customers with live loans, and the things that they would use to basically the money that they would use to pay these back, not just to us but to all their other obligations, were certainly disrupted. And we wanted them to know that, hey, we want to be there for you. We've started off by figuring out, ways to just let people have a break on their loan payment. That was kind of the easy thing that we could do very, very quickly. But over the course of the next few months, we did a lot of things that I think fintechs like us are a little bit more nimble and can spin up and do quickly that others can't. So we built this community of 2,000 plus customers, talk to them about what they're facing, what's going on, use that feedback to innovate, new solutions for them. In a lot of cases, it was around payment programs and how could we change what the payback obligations are to fit everybody's new reality, instead of just kind of, doing what I think a lot of banks that just have a little less flexibility would have done, is just say, hey, this is what it is. It is what it is. Good luck. And the beauty is, it was one thing for us to do it, but in personal loans, fintech actually has a pretty dominant share over banks. Banks largely exited the space in 2008, and a lot of the fintechs, a lot of our competitors took the same type of approach, and we even in some cases worked with them to encourage it. And what we've seen over this time, despite record unemployment, a lot of stress in the household, obviously the stimulus and things like that helped, but despite all of that, the customers actually stayed in a pretty good space relative to 2008, when delinquencies and customers having outcomes that they didn't want to happen and we didn't want to happen were, blowing up. In this situation, where in some ways things were actually a lot worse from an income standpoint, these customers were able to stay afloat because a lot of their lenders were able to do things that helped them kind of bridge the gap until things open back up again. And we still have to continue to be innovative, as who knows, maybe the next wave's coming.
No, I love that too. And exactly to your point, like the startups and fintechs that are sort of outside of that larger banking infrastructure are able to jump in, truly be customer centric, and innovate in ways that create experiences that really deliver value and help people get out of these hard times. So that being said, Pedro is at the earlier stages of building out his fintech company. So I'm definitely interested in his view of the landscape as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of as Bobby stated too, about how going into this, no one really knows what's going on. Where there was two deals that I had on the table to do, which was an investment in a franchise hotel, and even a acquisition deal of another food franchise. And of course, neither one went through because this happened right at the height of it all. But also just through observation and kind of being on the ground with all this, generally speaking, I think the biggest opportunity is I'm using a general term of transactions. Kind of basically piggyback off what Bobby and John said, that whether it's from the financing side or whether purchasing side, there's still a lot more opportunities there's a lot more room for innovation to help solve those problems. As we see in the world of franchising, I'm pretty sure the remodels of up and coming big brands, we're going to see a lot more drive-in. And my guess too, they're going to probably do some more transaction. We have some more software or something else in place to make the purchasing transaction even easier. Another thing that I've seen is on the financing side. Bobby kind of alluded to this already regarding the reality of banks stepping away of lending, and it's even on the business side as well. And this really proved that new innovation for businesses need flexible options for funding, more options for funding, and not just the standard of a bank in a standard loan. So I think we haven't even scratched the surface for innovation around FinTech. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there under the umbrella of helping make transactions easier than what they have previously been.
Totally agree, Pedro. Thank you for that. Would love to go to John and hear his thoughts there, especially considering, we're talking about being able to jump in and innovate, when people need help, right? Like people need financial services to survive in a lot of cases. So that being said, from a sort of policy standpoint, right? Like how do we make sure that our ecosystem is able to support the innovators and make sure that they're able to actually, test these products, make sure they're safe and effective, just like we would, anything else, like let's say a vaccine, before distributing it to the public. What can be done there, or what is being done there? I know you do a lot of good work from that perspective.
Well, and I'll what Bobby and Pedro were talking about, and I think small dollar or smallish dollar lending to consumers is a great example of how FinTech is able to take data, take alternative data on customers that banks really didn't use, and in many cases still don't use, and be able to provide cheaper credit access than they otherwise would have had access to prior. I mean, there was a time when it was either your bank or a payday lender, right? And so what solutions like Marlette and other folks that are in that business do, allows the cost of credit to go down significantly for many of these people. So I think that's terribly important. I think, another trend that you're seeing, which I think is really fascinating, and probably anyone who's shopped online by now sees it at the checkout, companies like Affirm or Afterpay or QuadPay, allowing you to break up payments. I mean, I guess the blunt way to describe it is, modern layaway, but it's a really good tool for big and small purchases. It allows you to just manage your cash better. And in most cases, I think those firms, and I'm pretty sure Afterpay does this, I'm not sure about every single one of them, they're not running a credit check on you. So, the days of having to sign up for I don't know if Sears is still in business or not, but sign up for a credit card, get the credit check, and then you get this 12-month 0% financing. We're coming up with brand new ways to provide the same services, but it's much more consumer friendly, I think.
Awesome. And to build off of that just a little bit, what do you think Delaware brings to the FinTech landscape? That may be a bit of a loaded question, but I know that I think it was just last year, Delaware Prosperity Partnership and the First State FinTech Lab put out the Delaware and the FinTech Future report. And Delaware is truly positioning itself as a FinTech leader. It already is in many regards. But what is left to be done? It could be.
I'll go first, but I'm more interested in like what Bobby and Pedro think with the businesses they run and invest in. But look, I think there's the things we always talk about: the geography, the relatively small nature of the state allows you to be pretty nimble. The state has a history of being able to be dynamic and take advantage of industry trends and entirely new industries. Credit cards are primary among those examples. But and I talked to Joe DiPaolo, who's CEO over at College Ave Student Loans. They're based right in Wilmington. He's a former MBA guy, among other things. And I think a lot of the fintechs you see in Delaware, there's a ton of MBA alums running around. But, because of that and other institutions, the state is really, really, really filled with incredibly experienced consumer credit professionals. I mean, there's just a lot of really deep experience that's been had there. And I think that's why we've seen the successful fintechs that we've had in part. And I think, look, the hope is, as we go forward, what we saw with, these MBA alums that have gone out and started all these different enterprises, that just continues, right? That you just sort of have this network effect from there, which is why it's really important and why we talk all the time, Garry, right? About how do we get new businesses started, how do we nurture the businesses that are already there, because this is it's not just what's the revenue next year. We have to have a really, really, really long time horizon in how we're thinking about this.
For sure. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I can build on that a little bit. The way we describe what John was saying is, when you think about the Delaware fintech versus, say, the Silicon Valley fintech, we kind of bring the fin in heavy. It's like capital fin, small tech. Out there, it's more like small fin, capital tech. And but I will say there's definitely a spirit of innovation in the type of people that leave the big banks and all the opportunities. Well, a lot of us have come from the big banks and we spent time there, but the people that go and try to do these things bring a different flavor to it. So as I think about like what value can be created by this kind of the state and the support network, obviously, the support they're doing for new startup businesses and people that want to bring jobs to the area, that's fantastic. But honestly, I think it's a big piece is thinking through things that can help the tech side. So I think there's a little company called Zip Code in Wilmington that, we have Marlette has a partnership with. We have we've brought in a number of employees there, or a number of our employees from kind of their coding school, and and continuing to foster those kinds of things that really brings the tech talent here to complement the fin. I think that's a real opportunity for Delaware and something that they've been doing a pretty good job with so far.
Yeah, and I just want to echo both Bobby and John. Totally agree. If you think about the Silicon Valley of the world, right? Even Seattle, there's always this big juggernaut of a company that comes out of a certain location. But out of that, the earlier employees, they go out and found other companies, and it just this big, huge ripple effect. And they typically have some synergies there. And actually, that was a thought I was thinking about going into to the point of talent, what Bobby's referring to. That's what I think that the value that the state of Delaware could continue to build is just that continue to help build a community of tech talent, cultivating that, because I think that's where that was the gap I think we had here for a while, and it's awesome to see Delaware focusing in on solving that and to continue focusing on helping that fill that void.
Thanks, Pedro. We do have a question in the chat from Tracy, which says, is there a particular type of tech talent that is needed? And I think that's a great question because, not all programmers code in the same language, right? So do we need programmers who know, I don't know, C++ and JavaScript? Do we need people who are expert in blockchain? Like what is the sort of type of talent that we need in the ecosystem?
I was gonna say that is a great question. I almost want to say is on a as per need basis, because each startup may have a different need. Each startup may have a different language that they might want to code in. I mean, some obvious ones for the future is of course AI, big data. I'm missing one right now, but I'm drawing a blank. But those are definitely, because those are some future trends. But I'm gonna say this: those are some basic ones to at least start with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting question. I'm not going to quote on the languages that are used just because that's not my particular area. But what I will say is development talent for sure is generically something that we're constantly looking for. I would call, when I think about where the opportunities are, I think it was John that referenced it earlier. It's leveraging data in ways that other people don't. So I think people familiar with the cutting edge of being able to store and manipulate data is certainly an area. And this is like quasi tech. I guess it's more math, but decision science is definitely an area that is one that, if we could make more progress here, it'd be really valuable. That's probably the one where we've hired outside of Delaware more often than inside Delaware, and I think that's probably the only place we've done that. Is we're still probably 95% Delaware based.
Gotcha. I think that touches directly onto the question that Bob put in the chat, which is, how does the environment remain nimble enough to provide the talent as the needs evolve so quickly? And that can be for anyone who is interested in tackling that one.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to answer this question exactly. What I will say is some of the opportunities that come with this, COVID setback that we've had as a country creates tons of opportunities in that, you don't necessarily, we've now figured out quickly out of necessity how to operate, remotely. We figured out, there's probably biases in the past where like, I want to hire somebody that lives here because I want them in the office. And we're just operating very differently. So there's a little bit of me that wonders how nimble we need to be and what we need to think about, rather than like catering the environment here. How do we foster, tapping into people that are outside our standard networks, and how do we start to integrate that stuff? So I don't think that's actually answering your question, but I think the question might be something that, I would think differently about in this kind of post work from home environment that's exploded on us.
And Bobby, that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I feel like the conversation's often, well, how do we get Delaware, Wilmington to be a San Francisco or even a Boston or an Austin or whatever? And it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen for any reason that Wilmington doesn't have enough cocktail bars or whatever trampoline parks, or it's a zip line. It's just that's not why. I mean, the reason San Francisco is because over time there's just a massive amount of venture capitalists there. And the second is there's Stanford, and Boston has MIT. Like that's just, we're not going to get Stanford or MIT, here. But what we do have, and it's multivariate, which is awesome, and it's the way it should be. You have initiatives like the UD FinTech Center, which is amazing and gets an enormous amount of attention. When it was announced, got an enormous amount of attention across the industry. I had so many people that have never been to Delaware and probably never had a desire to, who noticed it and thought it was really exceptional. You know, you've got the Newcastle County Chamber who's doing a lot of work in this space too. But I do think there's not one former colleague of mine that I worked with that is still in San Francisco. They have all moved somewhere else, nicer places that are much, much, much cheaper. And I think that's probably the way things are going to be for a while. So, you know, to the extent that Delaware has a low cost of living, that it does have access to metropolitan centers when and if you can go to those and there are things to do, I think that's a really good position to be in. I think it just really opens up it opens up a lot of opportunities for the state to bring in people that otherwise would have felt compelled and or required to live in any of these metropolitan areas that we're just not going to be able to compete with for reasons, again, outside of the nightlife.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I agree with both of them, Bobby and John. It's just going to be a new way of thinking. Bobby mentioned that, you know, because of this, might be able to hire talent from other regions. But at the same time, as an employee that lives in Delaware, you now, especially if you have a real love for Delaware and want to stay in Delaware, but you would love to work at another organization, but don't really want to leave, you know, you may have the opportunity now to actually work at that organization and still live where you prefer to live. You know, let's just say it's Delaware. And I think it just has to be a new way of thinking, of new opportunities. And I try to be an optimistic thinker. I look at it as from a positive way, is almost that you're getting really what you want in a way. You know, because a lot of people always, from the employee perspective, a lot of people always say they will love more flexibility with their schedule. They'll sometimes love to work at home, and this may be a new environment. Now, of course, it's not may not be an exact situation for every scenario, but some organizations are trying to set themselves up to have more of a flexible schedule, whether that means working from home for a period of time and then maybe popping in the office or something. I don't know, but I think that's still unfolding too. People are always trying to figure out what is the best fit, but generally speaking, I think this is a good opportunity to find a new way to work.
Awesome. Thanks, Pedro. All right, so we are in our final sort of minute here. So in conclusion, my final question for everyone is just very quickly, you know, what advice do you have for any FinTech innovators, emerging FinTech innovators in the region, and those who want to support them? What advice do you have for us? We can start with, let's start with Pedro.
I'm still thinking. I would say if this is trying to help emerging new FinTech companies, I don't know if this is some sound advice, but basically try to figure out how to help them really launch. And what I mean by that, because sometimes going into new areas, there's a lot of regulations, maybe legal regulations, maybe help that emerging entrepreneur get through that somehow at a good cost, you know, that's affordable, because, you know, starting a business is always expensive, and you know, certain areas have a lot more regulations than others. And so maybe just help in that respect, so that way that company can get off the ground.
Thanks, Pedro. Bobby, coming to you next. So you're in the chat, which is awesome.
Yeah, so look, I would just say there's so much value in networking and what you guys are pulling together here, and talking to people who've done it, you know, in Delaware, who've figured out, you know, where the resources are to kind of tap into and help you not kind of have to do everything on your own. It's intimidating to start, and you know, the more help you can get, the better, and the resources are there. You just kind of have to talk to people and figure out where they are.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, John, last but not least.
Well, I mean, I co-sign with everything that Pedro and Bobby just said. I guess my advice would just be, along with what Bobby said, engage. I mean, you've got an extraordinarily receptive audience with government stakeholders. You have the Delaware Prosperity Partnership, which is like just an enormously valuable asset that the state has. Newcastle County Chamber, you've got Newcastle County government. Well, you, Garry, and where people are right now, and the First State FinTech Lab. There is a very, very, very receptive audience to helping people get the resources, and they need to make their ideas a reality, make their businesses grow and thrive. And that is a very unique thing about Delaware versus other places. And I would urge people to do all of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your insights and knowledge with our little community here. That is time for our panel.